So it's tax day, and the Republican Party is now getting a firsthand lesson on how unpopular the Trump tax cuts really are. Now, in a tweet posted earlier this morning, the GOP account boasted that its tax cuts, quote, have put money back into the pockets of hardworking Americans so that they can spend it on things that actually matter to them and their families. What, like a candy bar? Look, as I'm going to point out, that's not entirely inaccurate. The full tweet, of course, it says, well, the Democrats are looking for more and more ways to spend taxpayer dollars, like, for example, on Medicare for all, healthcare. The GOP tax cuts have put money back in the pockets of hardworking Americans, and you know the rest of that tweet, because I just read it. So now, that tweet did not go over well on social media. Who said, and a lot of these, obviously taxpayers, right, said that they were stunned to find out that they actually owed the government money this time. Now, look, this is because the IRS, after the tax cuts, did not adjust their withholdings. So while people did see some slightly larger paychecks, like minuscule, they ended up getting not getting a return because they ended up taking a little bit more money home per week. And in a lot of cases, a lot of people really didn't even notice much of a difference. But then, of course, there are some cases where they were actually told that they had to pay in. Now, additionally, many others pointed to polls showing the majority of Americans didn't actually see or feel any of the effects of the tax cuts. Like, what are you talking about? I hardly make anything different than what I did last year, and you're telling me I'm not getting as big of a return as I did last year? Or I'm not, or I'm going to actually have to pay in? I mean, what's going on here? Now, the polls that I referenced is one from NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, right? Just 17% of people believe that their taxes went down this year thanks to the GOP tax cuts. 17%. Everybody else is like, I don't know. Is my taxes going down? I don't know. I heard it was a middle class tax cut, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not seeing it. I'm not noticing it. So what's going on here? Well, it's the fact that you guys got scammed. Now, so on that, let's go to some Twitter responses on this. Let's see. Frank Conway says, this is a lie. They gave me an extra $1,300 in withholdings, but when I paid an extra $4,000, and so I'm still $2,700 in debt to the government thanks to your stupid tax cut. Andrew E. Herrera says, my middle-class parents just got an $8,000 tax bill thanks to GOP tax cuts. Should clarify, they said that while the Democrats work for sensible government, the GOP tax cuts put money in the pockets of hardly working fund managers and billionaires so they can spend it on things they absolutely don't need. That's awesome. Melissa Dumphy says, I've never owed as much tax as I have for 2018. The check I sent to the IRS last week would be peanuts to the wealthy a-holes, most benefiting from your corporate welfare, but it's twice what my car's worth. Go F yourself. I think that's a fairly clear message. Now, Joe Cat Sr. says, can you explain how giving the 1% wealthiest Americans 83% of the tax cuts is putting money in hardworking Americans' pockets? They can't. You failed to mention the $2 trillion you want to take away from the poor and middle class. Dems vote against both, but the rich are happy. Thanks for the crumbs. I appreciate the crumbs. Now, in addition to what they mentioned, there also was an enormous amount of stock buybacks. So what that means is that they took that money that they saved from the tax cuts, and instead of investing it in their businesses and creating jobs, hiring workers, etc., they just took it to the stock market and bought back their own stock. That artificially inflated the stock prices and lets the executives take home a lot of money because most of their income is derived from stock options. So these stock buybacks broke records in 2018. Rakesh says, I don't know, this family of four saw a big tax rise this year. Thanks, GOP. I'll remember who was responsible when the next election rolls around. Cheryl Pachapin says, apparently not working hard enough because your damn cuts took deductions away, so I paid more in taxes. Thanks for absolutely nothing. Now, the deductions that they removed, by the way, were very, very significant. Now, is the SALT deduction. That's the state and local taxes, right? Now, how that works is that previously to the tax law, if you lived in a state that had higher taxes, for example, New York or California, you were able to deduct those taxes from your federal, right? Well, Trump's tax cuts got rid of those. So it basically punished people in blue states, causing them to have to pay more in federal taxes than they previously would. Plus, of course, pay state and local taxes. So now that is a big punishment to more liberal states. And of course, I think it was by design. Now, PBJ says, love it when we're told what's happening is the opposite of what I've seen with my own eyes and have felt with my own bank account. The Jube says, 57 cents a month is lit. Now, remember, Paul Ryan, when this had come out, the tax cuts, had touted an extra $1.50 a week on a school teacher's paycheck as an example of how much you're going to save. As no joke. And this, of course, is while schools continue to get starved of funding thanks to Betsy DeVos, whose whole purpose is to shut down the public school system. So now they're losing money, which guess what? That extra $1.50 a week on that school teacher's paycheck will likely go to buying school supplies because the schools can no longer afford it. Well done. Lots of savings. Do you feel like you're winning yet? I mean, I know some people's heads are still spinning from all the winning that we're doing. We just can't handle all this winning. There's more. Kevin D. Empelizzeri says, that's funny. I'm pretty sure it was your tax reform that made me owe over $4,000 in taxes this year. Dang. Michael Glenn Myers says, I just finished my tax return. I owe the federal government $5,000. That's okay. If the Kochs get a refund, I'm happy someone did. Gotta love that snark. Daniel Maycock says, 100% wrong. I paid more this year than ever. Understandably, I was never going to vote red, but I guarantee you, if you try this as a selling point, D's won't be able to thank you enough. So, as you can see from some of these responses, and of course, responses will vary. I'm sure there are people who really enjoy this tax cut, people who are more well off or living in the Midwest who did get a little bit of a return or at least a decent, tax year. But I think a lot of people, a great many people, end up getting hurt by this tax cut, which generally went to the rich. And so that's why it's such a disaster for the Republican Party. Look, if the Democrats are not able to capitalize on this sheer unpopularity of this tax law, of this massive giveaway to wealthy people, then I think they're lost. I mean, okay, they're already half lost. For example, you have Robert Francis O'Rourke, otherwise known as Beto O'Rourke, but I call him by his real name, Robert Francis. He wants to raise the corporate tax rate, right? Now you might think, well, that's great. Don't you want to raise the corporate tax rate? But get this. He wants to raise it to 25%. So now right now, the corporate tax rate, thanks to the Trump tax cuts, is at 21%. Donald Trump lowered it from 35%. So Robert Francis is not calling for a return to the Obama tax rates on corporations, which was already low enough. I think anything over 50% tax rate for multinational giant corporations would be a place to start. He says, no. Let's bring it to 25, which is still ultimately incredibly low. I mean, come on. Now, on the other hand, of course, you do have people like Bernie Sanders, and you also have Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren is calling for a 7% surtax on any profit over $100 million a year for big corporations. That's on top of a higher corporate tax rate and a wealth tax. So at least there are some good policies in the Democratic field. But what you're going to find from the establishment is generally more status quo which means low taxes on wealthy and corporations. So, and look, I could show you polls where most Americans agree with Warren and Sanders and AOC, progressives, that we should raise taxes on the rich and corporations because right now they're getting away with basically bloody murder. That's why this is a nightmare for the GOP. They went way too far with these tax cuts. They overreached, as they usually do. And now, I think, electorally, they're going to pay for it. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.